6:02 a.m. On the porch in a floral robe and bunny slippers, Nora Campbell stirred her coffee, steam rising from the mug into the crisp morning air. The birds were chirping, and her cat Momo was curled on the doormat. From the outside it looked like peace. She looked like any other retiree in a quiet suburb, sipping from a chipped mug that said "World's Best Niece," which she had stolen from her nephew as a joke. But when the HOA truck pulled up, everything changed. It was a white utility van with stenciled blue letters reading Neighborhood Code Enforcement. Nora blinked, took another sip, and squinted at the clipboard-wielding man stepping out. Two more followed, one younger, one wearing mirrored sunglasses like he thought he was in an action movie. The lead enforcer marched up her walkway like he owned it. By 6:15, a loud knock shook her screen door. Nora didn't flinch. She stood, tucked her mug under her arm, and opened the door halfway. Before she could even ask what was going on, the man shoved the door open and pushed her backward. He smelled like pine-scented arrogance. "You're in violation of Section 8, overgrown hedges obstructing clear walkway visibility," he barked. Nora frowned. "My hedges are 3 feet tall. I'm not part of the HOA. The man didn't even look at her. His eyes were already scanning her porch like it was a crime scene. He muttered something into a walkie-talkie and motioned to the other two. One began taking pictures of her front step. The other pointed at the cat like it was contraband. At 6:18, one of them pushed past her and muttered, "Just a housewife." He was about to move toward the kitchen, but Nora stepped in his path. A wall in a robe. Her eyes were calm, her hands loose at her sides. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You're trespassing. My property isn't within HOA limits. Back up now." He smirked. "You don't get to tell me what to do, sweetheart." And then it happened. At 6:21, the man raised his hand and shoved her shoulder hard enough that her slipper slid. It was a punch masked as a push, meant to intimidate. But Nora didn't stumble. She stood still, sipped her coffee again, and then she smiled. They had no idea who they'd just hit. By 6:22, she closed the door on the mid-threat and walked calmly to the kitchen. She placed her mug in the sink, opened the drawer with the sticky handle, and pulled out her old black notebook. It was titled Winter Plans, but inside it were hand-drawn maps, county boundary details, and contact info written in a precise military hand. She flipped to a dog-eared page. At the top, County Clerk, Martin Willis. Beneath that, retired. Lives in Oakhurst. Owes me too. The phone rang twice before an old familiar voice answered. She didn't waste time. Just asked one question. When was the last time HOA borders were legally expanded? Martin cleared his throat, voice still half-sleepy. "Not since 2009. Why? They just hit me, Marty. On my porch. Claimed jurisdiction." Silence. "I'll call you back in 20. Nora hung up and exhaled slowly. Her hands weren't shaking. Her breathing wasn't rushed. It had been years since she'd been in a real fight, but something primal hummed beneath her skin now. She looked out at her lawn. Everything was in place. The flagpole. The gnome. The petunias. She walked outside again and found the men still loitering by their truck. She raised her phone and snapped a photo. No words. Just the click. The one in mirrored sunglasses turned away like a vampire in daylight. "This is harassment, ma'am," one said. "This is my land," she replied. They drove off 5 minutes later. Not in a hurry, but shaken. They didn't get what they came for. But they left something behind. A clipboard. She picked it up. Inside were notes about her property, with words like recommend fine escalation and owner displays resistance behavior. That night, Nora didn't sleep much. Not because she was scared, but because she was thinking. Strategy came naturally to her. It always had. Back in Kandahar, it had saved lives. She never thought she'd use it against suburban enforcers, but war was war, no matter how stupid the battlefield. She called her old squadmate Henry just before midnight. "You ever heard of HOA guys punching an old woman?" "Jesus, what happened?" "They hit me this morning." "You okay?" They hit me. They didn't kill me. Big mistake. There was a pause on the other end. You want help? Not yet, she said. Just watch the news this week. The next morning, she visited the sheriff's office under the pretense of renewing her pet license. Deputy Willis, Martin's cousin, took the paperwork. You need backup? Just your ears. And a copy of the county zoning map. By noon, she had it. In highlighter, her property was clearly outside the HOA boundary. But right beside it was an empty lot with a pending development permit. That's when something clicked. They weren't just harassing her. They were trying to secure control before the new construction went through. If they could pressure her into compliance, they could claim jurisdiction over the entire stretch. She made 3 calls. First to the building inspector. Then the zoning office. Then her niece Katie, who ran a local newsletter blog. At 3:47 p.m., a new headline went up. Local veteran allegedly struck by HOA enforcer over hedge dispute. It spread fast. Comments flooded in. Neighbors who'd been too afraid to speak out now had a face to rally around. Nora didn't need to shout. She just needed the truth to echo. That evening, someone knocked on her door again. A different man this time. Nervous. Polite. Hi, ma'am. We're from the HOA board. Just here to apologize personally and clear up any confusion. Nora opened the door halfway. Apology accepted. Trespassing charges are still pending. He blinked. We were hoping to resolve this quietly. She smiled. You hit the wrong woman for quiet. The next morning, Nora was up before the sun. Not because of fear, but habit. Routine was the one thing war and retirement had in common. She brewed her coffee, fed Momo the cat, and pulled out her dusty boots from the hall closet. The floral robe was gone, replaced by jeans, a faded t-shirt that read, "Try me," and a lightweight field jacket. She walked her land quietly, tracing the fence line and stopping every 10 yards. The HOA thought they'd walked into some helpless grandma's yard. They didn't know this was a perimeter check. She noted each marker, the gate posts, and the soil level near the back boundary. By the time the sun fully rose, she had a mental blueprint of her entire property, updated and ready. She had learned long ago that the people who scream loudest often overlook the people who wait quietly. She was going to outlast them. Inside, her notebook now had a section labeled Operation Rosebush. She wasn't going to fire the first shot, but she sure as hell would be ready to return one. She made another call to Martin, her contact at the county clerk's office. He confirmed what she suspected. The HOA hadn't filed for any legal expansion. In fact, their authority stopped 2 houses short of hers. But the board was banking on ignorance and intimidation. If she hadn't known her rights, she might have believed them. Around 10:30 a.m., a packet slid under her front door. A letterhead with the HOA logo, followed by a violation notice. Section 18B, unauthorized front-facing lawn fixtures, with a $750 fine for her gnome, of all things. Her gnome. Gary had been sitting under that maple tree since 2004. She almost laughed. Instead, she filed the packet in a folder marked Evidence. She walked to her garage and pulled the old footlocker from under her tool bench. It still smelled like oil and cedar. Inside were mementos from her service days, but what she needed was tucked into a leather binder. Her discharge documents, medals, and a stack of notarized property surveys from the past 15 years. Not because she expected trouble, but because preparation was peace of mind. She scanned them and sent copies to her niece Katie, just in case things got digital. At noon, she called Henry again. They just find my lawn gnome. That's serious, huh? They're either stupid or very desperate. Henry chuckled. Both, probably. You still got the drone? Fully charged. Come by after 5. We're going to paint a picture. That afternoon, Nora mowed her lawn with the precision of a soldier sweeping terrain. She waved at neighbors, smiled at children riding bikes, and let everyone see the calm. She knew some of them had been fined for flower pots, or flags, or the height of a swing set. Many had paid. Some had moved. But now they had a symbol. Someone punched the wrong woman. And in a neighborhood like this, word spreads faster than wildfire. At exactly 5:08 p.m., Henry pulled up in his rusted blue truck. He looked like a mechanic, smelled like barbecue, and had a brain like a chess master. They shook hands and went around back, where he launched the drone and started mapping the entire HOA perimeter. 20 minutes later, they had aerial footage showing that Nora's house wasn't just outside the border. It was surrounded by unincorporated county land. The HOA had no legal authority there. They were bluffing, and now Nora had proof. They also spotted something else: 3 new no trespassing signs installed by the HOA facing her property, trying to make it look like she was encroaching on their land. She grinned. Desperation was loud. She preferred quiet competence. She printed the drone photos, annotated them, and included timestamp. Then she mailed them, not emailed, to the local paper. The editor owed her 2 favors from a story about flood damage she helped with years ago. That night, a new article hit the paper's website. Retired veteran fined for lawn gnome. HOA overreach? The story went viral by morning. Neighbors began asking questions. Some came to her door, softly at first, testing the waters. Nora welcomed them in, offered lemonade, shared her maps. She didn't push them toward anger. She pushed them toward knowledge. And soon, they were pushing back on their own. On Tuesday, the HOA's head enforcer returned. Same mirrored sunglasses. Different energy. This time, he brought a camera and a clipboard. "We're here to reassess the situation," he said. "You mean lie with better lighting?" He flinched. "Ma'am, we'd like to settle this peacefully. You already punched me. This is peaceful." He hesitated, then reached into his folder and handed her a new document. A cease and desist order. Not legally binding, just intimidating on letterhead. She accepted it, walked calmly to her barbecue grill, opened the lid, and dropped the letter onto the coals. Then closed the lid again. "Was that your only copy?" The man turned pale. She smiled again. It was becoming a pattern. That night, she opened a bottle of red wine and sat on the porch, watching Momo bat at bugs. She wasn't celebrating, just observing. The way a storm feels before it breaks. She knew the HOA wouldn't stop here. They were already preparing their next move. Maybe a false noise complaint. Maybe forged infractions. They'd go lower. And she was ready for it. Inside, her notebook now had a new section. Operation Groundhog. She had a plan to bait them. Let them install a false fence just a little over the line. Then she'd trigger the legal trap. A landlock clause from a 1984 plat map that no one bothered to read. If they built it, they'd trap themselves. She'd give them the rope. They'd hang themselves. At midnight, her phone buzzed. A new text from Katie. "A woman from 3 blocks over just emailed me. Says HOA's threatening to fine her over a broken garage light. Wants to talk to you. You're becoming a neighborhood legend." Nora smiled faintly and typed back. "Legends are just quiet people who got tired of being quiet. Tell her to stop by tomorrow." She turned off her phone, pulled a wool blanket over her legs, and whispered to herself, "Let them come." The sun rose over Oak Ridge Lane, casting long shadows on the neatly trimmed lawns and perfectly paved sidewalk. But Nora's house stood out now, not because of defiance or disorder, but because of calm resilience. While other yards bore signs of fear and forced compliance, hers stood proud. The gnome sat firmly in place. The hedges were untouched. And above the door, an old, folded American flag hung in a shadow box. Not for decoration. For memory. Inside, Nora had cleared the dining table. Maps, newspaper clippings, HOA violation letters, and sticky notes filled every inch. She stood over it like a commander over a battlefield. Because that's what it was now. A battlefield. And she wasn't just defending herself. She was protecting every resident who had been fined, bullied, or silenced into submission. She'd started alone, but the war was growing bigger than her. By 9 a.m., the doorbell rang. Nora opened it to find a woman in her late 30s, wearing a wrinkled cardigan and holding a folder full of papers. "You're Nora?" the woman asked softly. "That's what my cat calls me, yeah." "You must be Diane." The woman looked relieved, almost tearful. She stepped inside and placed her folder on the table. "They're threatening to put a lien on my house over yard neglect. My husband deployed 3 months ago. I have 2 kids and a busted lawnmower. They don't care." Nora sat down across from her and began reading through the violations. Petty. Vindictive. Fines for leaving trash bins out 15 minutes late. A $200 charge for having chalk drawings on the sidewalk. And of course, the classic overgrown lawn notice. The grass was barely past regulation, but the picture included in the violation showed her child's tricycle and a bag of groceries by the door. "They're not policing lawns," Nora muttered. "They're policing people." Diane blinked. "What do? We document. We connect. And we make them panic. One paper cut at a time." Nora photocopied the folder and gave the originals back to Diane. "I'm starting a database. Every violation, every photo, every signature. If they want to escalate, we'll give them more data than they know what to do with." She handed Diane a small card. A burner number, a secure email, and the name of the legal aid office she'd funded anonymously. "You're not alone anymore." Later that afternoon, Nora met with Katie and Henry at the public library. They reserved a small community meeting room and filled it with laptops, clipboards, and index cards. Katie projected a map on the wall, highlighting HOA-controlled zones in blue, suspected unlawful expansions in yellow, and confirmed illegal activities in red. "We've got 8 homeowners already sharing files," Katie said. "Some even recorded board meetings. They talk like mob bosses. It's wild." Henry chimed in, flipping through drone photos. "Their new clubhouse? It overlaps a water drainage easement. If we push that, they could get shut down for environmental violations." Nora nodded. "It's time for Phase 2. Operation Groundhog? No. That's for later. Right now, we play polite. Make them comfortable. Make them cocky. Then we expose everything at once." That evening, the HOA announced a Community Unity barbecue at the clubhouse that weekend. It was a PR move, pure and simple. Nora received the invite via email and printed it out with a grin. "Let's RSVP," she said. Saturday arrived fast. The clubhouse lawn was decorated with American flags, grilled hot dogs, lemonade stands, and a banner that read, "We're all neighbors here." But beneath the surface was tension. Some residents smiled too wide. Others avoided eye contact with the board entirely. And at the center table, Jack Lawson sat, former Marine, current HOA vice president, and the man Nora never thought she'd see again. She hadn't seen him in almost 15 years, not since Afghanistan. He'd saved her life during an ambush, dragged her back behind cover with bullets flying past them both. And now he was here, sitting at the head of a board that punched her in the face and tried to cover it up. She walked right up to him, her plate full of ribs, and said nothing at first. Just let the silence stretch. Jack blinked. "Nora? Small world, huh?" He stood, awkward and unsure, like a man remembering too late that actions have consequences. "Didn't realize you lived here. Didn't realize you forgot who you used to be." His jaw clenched. "I didn't know they look, I don't control everything. This isn't the core. No, it's not. In the core we had rules. And we didn't hide behind sunglasses and fine print." Jack looked down, then motioned to a nearby bench. "Can we talk?" They sat, plates untouched, as fireworks cracked faintly in the distance from a kid with sparklers. "I tried to leave," Jack confessed. "Twice. But the board threatened to sue me for breach of contract. I got stuck." "You don't get stuck. You choose to stay quiet." Nora pulled a small envelope from her pocket and handed it to him. "What's this?" "Photocopies. Of your signatures. On 3 forged documents." Jack's hands trembled. He flipped through the pages. Then stopped. His face went pale. "They used my name? And your seal. Sloppy work, too. I already had 2 attorneys confirm it." He looked at her, finally with something close to regret. What do you want? Truth. From you. In front of everyone. I can't. Then step aside. Because I'm done being quiet. Nora stood, walked toward the grill table, and tapped a spoon to her glass. Dozens of eyes turned. Conversations faded. Even the HOA president, Celeste, narrowed her gaze. I'd like to say a few words. Jack stood behind her, frozen. Some of you know me. Some don't. But last week, I was assaulted in my own home by people representing this board. Since then, I've gathered dozens of cases, photos, documents, and testimonies. This isn't about rules anymore. It's about fear, bullying, and silence. She held up the forged document. If anyone here has been fined, threatened, or lied to, come find me. There's help. And it's real. Celeste stepped forward, smiling tight. Now, this isn't the place for drama. Nora smiled back, colder than steel. Then maybe we should bring it to court. The crowd murmured. Jack walked away. Celeste's lips twitched. She knew things had shifted. But she didn't know just how much. Back at home, Nora fed Momo, poured herself tea, and looked out the window. They wouldn't hit her again. Because the next strike wouldn't be physical. It would be public, legal, and devastating. By sunrise the next day, Celeste's scream came. Not literally, not yet, but in the form of a neighborhood-wide emergency bulletin slipped into every mailbox before dawn. In bold red ink across the top, Community Alert. Rogue resident threatens HOA stability. Below that, Nora's name. Her photo. A list of cherry-picked accusations pulled from twisted truths and fictional infractions. They painted her as a bitter troublemaker who refused to collaborate, undermined communal unity, and violently resisted compliance efforts. Nora found the flyer stuffed halfway under her doormat, like even the delivery person felt too ashamed to fully commit. She picked it up, skimmed the contents, and chuckled as she poured her coffee. It was desperate, sloppy, and almost theatrical in tone. Still, it wasn't harmless. Celeste wasn't trying to inform. She was trying to isolate Nora, socially, publicly, psychologically. Classic divide-and-conquer tactic. But Celeste forgot one crucial thing. Nora had spent years surviving psychological warfare. She didn't crack under propaganda. She sharpened her blade. Before the clock struck 8, Nora made a copy of the bulletin and emailed it to her lawyer. Then she sent a group text to Henry, Katie, and Jack. Game on. By 10 a.m., Celeste was on local talk radio, spewing the same nonsense she'd printed in the bulletin. She called Nora volatile, claimed the drone photos were fabricated, and said the HOA would pursue civil penalties for slander and disruption. She didn't name the anonymous website or the growing number of residents filing formal complaints against the board. She didn't mention the cease operations order. She only pushed one narrative, that Nora was dangerous. Nora responded by holding a quiet press gathering at the public park, flanked by 5 elderly neighbors who had also received bizarre fines and harassing letters over the past 2 years. Each brought their paperwork, their stories, their receipts. Eileen, who'd been fined $400 for a porch swing her husband built before he passed. Carlos, who'd been charged $125 for flying the Mexican flag on his son's birthday. Mrs. Fletcher, fined for her hearing aids chime being audibly disruptive to a nearby yoga group. Nora didn't say much. She let them talk. Let the cameras roll. Then she simply stated, if this board thinks veterans, grandmothers, and immigrants are the threat to this community, maybe the problem isn't the residents. The clip went viral by nightfall. By Wednesday, something shifted. A local journalist published a deep dive titled, HOA from Hell? Featuring first-hand interviews, timeline breakdowns, and financial irregularities linked to board spending. Turns out, Celeste had authorized $18,000 in discretionary spending labeled community development, but most of it had gone to staging lavish parties and hiring her niece as a full-time enforcement photographer. The receipts didn't lie. And residents began knocking on Nora's door not for help, but to say thank you. But retaliation wasn't over. At 2 p.m., while Nora was pruning her vegetable garden, 2 HOA enforcers showed up again. Not in uniform this time. Wearing plain clothes, holding phones recording, pretending to be casual neighbors. But their questions were sharp. So, you planning to sue the board? You know, a lot of people say you're being dramatic. That you want attention. You sure you're mentally stable after all your army stuff? Nora paused, gently snipped a tomato stem, and turned to face them fully. You boys fishing for something? One of them smirked. Just wondering if you plan to cause more problems. I don't cause problems, she said. I document them. She plucked a second phone from her pocket, already recording the entire interaction, and smiled. Smile for the internet. They froze, and walked away without another word. 10 minutes later, she uploaded the footage to the neighborhood portal with the title, "Still think this is about hedges?" The views climbed in real time. Celeste panicked. By Thursday morning, she was knocking at Nora's door in person, flanked by her ever-smiling assistant, clipboard in hand. I thought maybe we could talk face to face, Celeste said with a sugary tone. Like neighbors. Nora replied flatly. Yes, exactly. This whole escalation doesn't benefit anyone. I think we've both made our points. Nora tilted her head. Did your assistant bring a peace treaty or a fine? The woman didn't laugh. Celeste pressed on. We could discuss revising some of the more excessive enforcement policies. Quietly. No press. No legal mess. Nora raised an eyebrow. Are you offering a bribe? Celeste's smile tightened. I'm offering to clean up this misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, Nora said. You allowed your enforcers to punch me. You falsified boundaries. You ran a smear campaign. You're done. Celeste's facade cracked just for a second. If you take this to court, it will bankrupt the HOA. Nora didn't blink. Then you should have thought of that before you started a war you couldn't finish. Celeste left without another word. That night, Nora received 2 anonymous letters taped to her mailbox. One was a thank you note, handwritten, with a child's drawing tucked inside showing Miss Nora's garden, and a smiley sun. The other was a crude drawing of a burning house, and the words, "Leave while you can." She scanned both, documented the incident, and emailed it to her legal team and the sheriff. Then she filed a formal restraining order request against Celeste and the HOA board, citing ongoing harassment, doxing, and threat. The next day, a judge approved the order. Now, legally, any HOA board member who stepped onto Nora's property or sent her another letter would be in violation. It wasn't about revenge. It was about boundaries. Real ones, legal ones, and moral ones. That evening, Nora hosted her first real backyard gathering, not for war, not for press, but for community. 15 neighbors came. Some brought cookies. Others brought documents. Most brought questions. How do we get rid of the board? Is it possible to dissolve the HOA? Can we hold a vote? Nora didn't promise a revolution. She promised information. And together they planned a town hall. A real one. Transparent. Public. Loud. At 10 p.m., she sat alone under the fairy lights, her cat curled in her lap, the air thick with summer heat and change. The fight wasn't over, but something had shifted permanently. The HOA could no longer hide behind fines and flags. They were exposed. And that meant one thing. The final phase could begin. Saturday morning came with a breeze that hinted at autumn, though the calendar still said July. Nora woke to the sound of her wind chimes and the smell of freshly cut grass drifting in through her open window. Momo was already on the windowsill, tail flicking lazily as she watched birds skitter along the power line. But outside the calm, the energy in Oak Ridge Lane was different now. Tense, watchful, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. Nora made her coffee, but she didn't sit on the porch like usual. Today wasn't about peace. It was about preparation. In 12 hours the town hall would take place. the first one not run by the HOA in over a decade. And it wasn't just residents showing up. A local journalist, 2 county officials, and an independent HOA compliance lawyer had confirmed attendance. There would be cameras, witnesses, and, hopefully, accountability. At 9:13 a.m., Henry pulled into Nora's driveway in his sputtering truck. He climbed out with a cardboard box full of files and a plastic tub of lemonade concentrate. "I brought evidence," he said, "and beverages." They spread everything across Nora's dining room table: violation letters, fine receipts, resident testimonies, legal loopholes, and drone map. Katie joined shortly after with a foldable projector and a slideshow presentation titled Oak Ridge or Oppression: How the HOA Failed Its Community. "Too dramatic?" she asked. "Not dramatic enough," Nora replied. By noon, they had a lineup of speakers, printed handouts for attendees, and a timeline to walk the audience through the decay of the HOA's authority. Jack called in and confirmed he would be there, seated in the front row. Not as a board member, he'd resigned fully, but as a witness. He was ready to testify about the forged documents, the misuse of funds, and the intimidation tactics Celeste had greenlit. As the sun dipped low, people began trickling into the community center. Some came cautiously, looking over their shoulders. Others walked in like soldiers returning to a battleground. Parents with kids, seniors with folders, veterans with arms crossed. Nora stood near the entrance, shaking hands, offering lemonade, smiling gently. She recognized fear in a few faces. It was the same kind she'd seen overseas. The fear of making noise after being silenced for too long. But there was hope there, too. Quiet. Burning. Waiting. Celeste showed up 10 minutes late, flanked by 2 board members and her assistant. She wore a navy pantsuit, hair tied tight, lips pursed like she was chewing glass. She didn't speak to anyone. Just sat in the back row, arms folded, eyes cold. At 6:05 p.m., Nora stepped to the front of the room. The room went still. "Thank you all for coming. My name is Nora Campbell. Many of you know me. Many of you have heard about recent events. But I'm not here for personal revenge. I'm here because something has gone wrong in this community. And it's time we fix it together." She clicked the first slide. A timeline of HOA overreach incidents starting 3 years ago. From minor violations escalating to unjustified fines. Nora narrated calmly, methodically, drawing lines between actions and consequences. Katie followed with examples of forged documents and the board's refusal to hold open elections for 3 consecutive years. Henry broke down the illegal fence construction and the access clause that rendered the clubhouse legally unusable. And Jack stood up last. "I was part of this," he said. "I signed things I shouldn't have. I turned a blind eye when people were being targeted. But I can't do that anymore. I served this country believing in honor and accountability. That didn't stop when I took off the uniform. And it shouldn't stop just because someone puts on a blazer and calls themselves president of a homeowners association." The applause came hesitantly at first. Then louder. Stronger. People stood. Celeste stood too, but only to leave. She didn't speak. Just walked out, her assistant scrambling behind her. And she knew. Everyone knew. Her grip was gone. When the town hall ended, Nora stayed behind to clean up. Residents came forward one by one, thanking her, offering to help, asking what came next. "We vote," she said. "We change the bylaws. We elect a new board. Or dissolve the HOA entirely." The momentum had shifted. And they were ready. But Nora wasn't celebrating yet. She knew better. Desperate people made dangerous decisions. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number. Thought you'd won? Check your garden." She was already moving before the second buzz came. By the time she stepped onto the porch, flashlight in hand, her breath caught. Her vegetable beds had been destroyed. Plants uprooted. Soil ripped. Gnome shattered. Her American flag trampled in the dirt. She stood there, silent, the beam of her light flicking across broken tomato vines and scattered mulch. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. She just walked back inside, grabbed her phone, and started taking photos. By sunrise, she had filed a police report, uploaded images to the neighborhood portal, and sent a copy to every county official who had attended the town hall. "No amount of vandalism will undo truth," she posted beneath the photos. "We're awake now." The support came flooding in. Dozens of residents came by that day with new soil, seeds, garden tools, and even a new gnome carved by a local woodshop owner. No one asked what happened. They all knew. But no one mentioned Celeste's name either. Not out of fear, but because her power was gone. She wasn't relevant anymore. She was a shadow pretending to be a wall. That night, Nora stood at her freshly planted garden bed. The new gnome sat crooked but proud, its wooden face carved into a small grin. She watered the soil quietly, moonlight washing over the porch. This fight had never been about one punch, one flag, or even one woman. It had always been about what happens when people refuse to be silenced. When they stand up, not with fists but with proof. With each other. And Nora? She wasn't done yet. Because the final vote was just days away. And she wasn't going to win it alone. She was going to win it with every person they tried to shut down. Every fine they'd buried. Every lie they'd written. Every neighbor who'd been afraid to speak. The final chapter was coming. And it would not be quiet. Voting day arrived under overcast skies, as if the heavens themselves were waiting to see which way the community would lean. Nora was up at 5. She didn't need an alarm anymore. Her body was too tuned to the rhythm of the fight. She fed Momo, double-checked her documents, and stepped into her boots like she had every morning since her front porch turned into a war zone. But today felt different. Not tense, not nervous, steady. Like justice had taken its first breath and was about to speak. The community hall was already buzzing by 7 a.m. Fold-out tables lined the walls, manned by volunteers checking names, handing out ballots, and overseeing the official HOA vote. Full board re-election or HOA dissolution. 2 boxes. 1 choice. 2 futures. Celeste showed up fashionably late again, dressed in white, trying to radiate innocence. But her aura was gone. She was followed by only one remaining loyalist, Greg, the clipboard enforcer who once threatened to fine a man for painting his shutters beige. Even he looked uneasy. Nora didn't speak to her. Didn't need to. The numbers would do the talking. Residents arrived steadily. Families, elders, veterans, renters, and owners alike. People Nora hadn't even seen before emerged from side streets and alleyway driveways. They came with strollers, with walkers, with lawn chairs in hand. And with every new face, Celeste's smile faded just a bit more. By noon, the room was full. Jack stood up before the first vote was cast. "I served this country believing we protect each other," he said. "I joined this board believing I'd do the same. I was wrong. I let fear and silence hold me hostage. But this community reminded me that the moment you speak truth, you become free. Today, let's all get free." Applause erupted. Not out of pity. Out of power. Celeste stood too, trying to reclaim the floor. "I just want to say," she began, but the murmurs drowned her out. She pressed on anyway, tone tightening. "There's a lot of misinformation going around. I've served this neighborhood for over 8 years. "You served yourself," someone called out from the crowd. Another voice followed. "Where were you when I got fined for a cancer awareness banner?" A third. "You threatened to foreclose on my dad for a missing mailbox number." Celeste stopped, stared. And for the first time since this war began, she looked small. The voting began. Each person stepped forward, cast their ballot silently, and dropped it into the box. No shouting. No debate. Just a shared understanding that this wasn't about revenge. It was about returning the neighborhood to its people. It took nearly 2 hours to count. During that time, Nora sat by the window, watching the clouds drift low, heavy and still. Katie sat beside her, working quietly through photos of the vandalism. Henry, in the back, was helping a senior couple navigate the voting app that had been set up for accessibility. At exactly 3:41 p.m., the results were announced. 325 votes cast. 273 votes to dissolve. 52 votes to retain the current HOA structure. It was over. There were no cheers at first. Just stunned silence. Then came a wave of collective exhale. A tension that had gripped the neighborhood for years evaporated like fog in sunlight. Some people clapped. Others hugged. One man even wept openly. Nora later learned he'd been battling the HOA over his disability ramp for almost 5 years. Celeste stood frozen. Then turned and walked out without a word, her assistant trailing after her with paperwork still clutched to her chest. No one stopped them. No one needed to. They were irrelevant now. Nora stepped up to the front as the crowd began to shift into conversation. She didn't grab a microphone. She just raised her voice enough to be heard. This isn't just the end of something broken. It's the start of something better. A community that listens, that respects, that protects. We didn't win today because we fought hard. We won because we stood together. Applause erupted again. This time louder. Real. Over the next week, the changes happened fast. The county officially dissolved the Oak Ridge Lane HOA with minimal protest. The clubhouse was locked for audit. All active fines were frozen pending legal review. A temporary community council was formed, made up of volunteers and residents, including Nora. They weren't politicians, just people who cared. One by one, the stories came out. The single mother who was nearly evicted over a $30 trash bin fine. The elderly man fined $900 for having too many potted plants. The family who stopped celebrating holidays because their decorations were labeled non-compliant. Each story fed the fire of reform, and Nora made sure they were heard. She helped them document, testify, rebuild. But she didn't seek credit. In fact, when a local TV station asked her to do an on-camera interview, she declined. This wasn't about me, she told them. It was about everyone who got pushed too far and finally pushed back. One evening, as summer slipped toward fall, Nora sat on her porch again. A fresh garden was growing. The new gnome stood proudly at the edge, holding a tiny wooden flag. Momo curled in her lap, purring like an engine at rest. Jack stopped by, carrying 2 cold lemonade. "You could have left," he said, handing her one. "Could have," she agreed. "But I don't run." He nodded. "You know, they're calling you the Quiet Storm." She smirked. "I like that. Sounds better than Crazy Gnome Lady." Jack raised his cup. "To the quiet ones. The underestimated. The ones who wait, then strike." They clinked glasses. And as the sun dipped behind the houses that now felt free, Nora finally leaned back. She hadn't wanted a war. But when it came to her door, she hadn't blinked. She simply reminded them what silence sounds like when it turns into thunder.